Welcome back, everyone, to Some Old AV Guy. My name's Eric, your host. Today on our episode, we have a good friend of mine, Jim Callahan from the Rochester, New York market.
Hey, hey.
Welcome, Jim. So, if you wouldn't mind just kind of telling our viewers what what got you into the industry, how you got into the industry, and then kind of what typical role you use.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so brief backstory. I got into the industry kind of late. When you talk to a lot of different people, I was never like, an AV nerd in high school. I didn't do sound in my church. I didn't, really grow up around it or anything like that. But what I did do is I started playing drums in like punk and hardcore bands around like 1988.
Nice.
So I was always in the clubs, that kind of stuff. For some reason, even as the drummer, I was always the guy that had to talk to the sound tech. So I learned the language pretty quick. I went to a technical high school and I studied electronic repair. So I knew like how to solder and Ohm's law and the difference between a diode and a capacitor and just all that kind of, generalized, electrician, electronics kind of stuff. And then this is literally in November of 2000. So at that point, I was 28. Like I said, I was kind of late when I got into this industry.
Sure.
November of 2000, I walk into a club here in Rochester, New York called the Bug Jar, long-standing, kind of like do-it-yourself indie rock punk venue. A good buddy of mine, Nick Marinaccio. Nick's currently out on tour with Tower of Power right now.
Nice.
He's done a lot of great work. He's a good friend. He comes up to me and is like, "Hey, Jimmy, what are you doing right now?" And I'm like, "I'm here to get drunk and listen to some metal bands play." Like, "What's up?" He's like, "Oh, I'm double booked. I'm supposed to be like working over at Dinosaur Barbecue with bands right now. This show wasn't on the calendar. Do you want to do sound?" Well, I said yes. And then, especially because he was like, "I can pay you." I was like, "Uh-huh."
Yeah.
So I called him the next day to get paid. I said, "Hey, I really like that. I like the excitement of it. I got the same thrill from mixing a band that first time that I still get to this day from playing in a band." So he kind of started showing me the ropes. I eventually went to a local community college and took their kind of recording audio engineering program. Being a little bit of an older student, I was a little bit closer with my professors than I was with the fellow students. My wife at the time, her and I moved to California. I was I lived in the Bay Area, just kind of trying to figure it out. She came back from a catering gig she had with the name of a company written on it. And she's like, "Here's an AV company in the same like strip mall that the warehouse or whatever is for my catering company, give them a call. You're like floundering, just doing whatever to make ends meet." I was like, "Okay." Name of that place is Corporate Media Systems. That's in San Rafael, California. So Carl or JJ, Hank, anybody, if you happen to hear this, thank you so much for the opportunity you provided me. I fired them off a resume, went and interviewed with them. Literally had no experience doing conventions, galas, parties. I'm used to going into like clubs with installed sound systems and using like analog boards, right?
Yeah.
That was my background.
Trying to make it work with what you got.
Exactly, yeah. Bug Jar was the kind of club where like you might be soldering an XLR cable while the band is playing because you need another cable for the next band and you don't have it.
Yeah.
So like, "Oh, there's four people that need to sing. Well, two of you are sharing a mic because I got three."
Yeah, that was kind of the norm though, as far as clubs back then.
Oh,
Anyways,
yeah.
because from all the war stories I've heard about CBGB's being, a small,
Mhm.
tiny little club, but everybody played there. You just had to make whatever you had work, and it's not like you could just run out to the nearest Radio Shack or
Yeah.
Guitar Center and get something.
Yeah. So anyway, I go to corporate medias. I go to the interview. It goes well. I'm able to charm the guy. You've known me for a long time, Eric. I can talk to anybody about anything. I do myself a great favor as they give me a tour of the warehouse. I start trying to memorize as many like manufacturers and model numbers as I can
Mhm.
because I don't know an Ike from a Proxima projector. I don't know what a Presentation Pro is. I don't know what a Sony 1024 HD. I don't know any of this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I go out to my car after the interview. I write down everything I can just so that I can like go Google it. Now, remember, this is like 2003, so Google wasn't the behemoth that it is today. I was pretty much looking for any information I could get from any of the manufacturers. Um, they call me to do a gig. I also have the light bulb go off, and I'm like, hey, is there any way I can get a pull list before I come to the gig just so I know what gear I'm working with? They're like, oh, yeah, sure. 5 minutes later, that shows up in my email. I Google all the gear I have and how to connect it. I show up and it's like, here I am, AV 101. Yeah. Within 3 years of being out there, I went from being a freelance technician to being their lead technician and their warehouse manager. To right around that time that the family moved back to Rochester. We were back here 3 weeks, maybe. The ex-wife has another catering gig. The company that both you and I worked for, CMI, was the AV provider. Mm-hmm. She looked at the two guys that were working, figured out which one of them was most likely in charge of that crew. That was our dear friend Steve Farmer. She went right up to Steve and pitched a verbal resume to him. He gave her his business card, put Kevin Marsh's name on the back with a phone number and email. I fired him off a resume the next day. In less than a week, I was working full time for CMI and taking gigs right off the bat. So
nice.
Yeah, that's how I got my start, and that was 17 years ago. Something like that.
Isn't it crazy? It's been so long. You had kind of mentioned your initiative as far as researching gear when, or at least when you were interviewed.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It was from CMS to CMI.
Nice. Wasn't too far.
Wasn't too far.
So I guess what I'm trying to lead into is the fact that someone wanting to get into the industry, you really need to take your own initiative, research some equipment, maybe, I even hate to say this, but go on YouTube. There's many different channels for companies that actually make the gear. One of our past episodes, I talked about a gentleman who works in the film and concert industry, and he just happened to show up at a concert and kind of hopped in with people. Now, obviously, nowadays you can't do that, but at least trying to get to know as much of the gear as possible before you just kind of show up at a gig. It's not like the old days where you could kind of learn it as you go. Yeah. So if you wouldn't kind of mind speaking on that, I mean, obviously you've seen the industry take leaps and bounds since you first started, but where do you kind of see the industry going? Have you heard of, or do you see any new gear coming out or talks of something that is new?
As far as where the industry is going, everyone knows the boogeyman in the room.
Sure.
So much stuff is going AI. That's it. As of right now, we still need strong backs and small brains to put it all together. All due respect to my crew in the industry.
Yeah.
I'm clowning here. I'm also an IATSE Local 25 card holder, so I'm not. Yeah, I was even starting to see that as more and more. As we started to get further and further away from outboard gear and into digital stuff, and you start to see more and more, like the Dugan Auto Mixer, when Dan Dugan's brainchild there was added to all the Yamaha consoles. And then I own like a little Behringer XA Air 18, which is just a little like stage box that you control with an iPad. That has an auto mixer in it. It's not the best. It's not a Dugan. It's not great, but it's in there. There's some automated multi-band compressors. Even things like
Dante. I mean, Dante wasn't around back in the day.
Dante was not around back then. Shure used to make a thing called the DFR, which is their digital feedback reducer. It's like it's like EQing with an axe, but if you're in a hurry or
Yeah.
if it's just a quick little setup and you need to whatever. But now I know a lot of manufacturers, including I can obviously speak mostly to the gear that my main job
Hmm.
works with. So for like breakout rooms and that kind of stuff, we have a lot of turbo sound speakers, which is another Behringer Midas Music Tribe kind of product. But it has a digital feedback reducer in it also.
Yeah.
And it's such a cheat when you're going to do like a little whatever 100-person awards dinner or something like that, and you're sent out with a you don't have like a digital mixer. The new like Yamaha DM series is making it way easier to bring a digital console into like a breakout room space and have it be intuitive and helpful. But if you're still going out there with something like a Mackie 1402 or something, you don't have to worry about dragging a 31 band graphic out with you. You just crank up the gain and boop, push the button on the back of the thing, and it gets real loud. And it doesn't sound the best, but like I said, if you're doing the 100-200 person awards dinner, like recognition luncheon or something like that, it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Computers doing the work of the human's ear. Again,
Exactly.
that's basic AI there.
I'd actually mentioned that in a previous episode on how I don't think that AI will ever replace bodies. It's going to replace it's going to make a lot of everything that is difficult to do all at once a whole lot easier.
I saw some. I'm also the head of audio at CMAC, which is like a 1,800 person. For the people that don't know this area, that's like an 18,000 person amphitheater.
Mhm.
Like that's the big amphitheater around here. And I forget the manufacturer because it wasn't my crew, obviously, because I'm dealing with audio. But somebody came in with a self-leveling video wall. They just put the span sets, everything on the truss. They put all the panels up. They raised the thing off, and then we sat back and I watched it go like dip, 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 and eventually, like when it was level, all the panels flashed, and they were like, "That's done." And I was like, "Oh my god, that takes away like hours of like, okay, bump the downstage truss in, bump the upstage right truss out, take this, like."
Yeah, and not having to use all the laser guided distos just to make sure that it's exactly the same or whatever. Yep.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. That's really what I'm seeing is that kind of stuff. And I am no Luddite. I am certainly a fan of technology, and I'm certainly constantly trying to grow my base of knowledge and keep up with new technology. Anybody who's our age in the industry, we're both in our early 50s, knows that as you get older and older and older, it's harder to keep up. It takes more work.
That's true.
To keep up with new technology. Like it took me, I think 3 times going through Dante level 3 and like 4 times taking the test before I got it, because I did not grow up with computer networking.
Yeah.
It's something I've had to learn and pretty much teach myself as I could go along. And there has not been really the time for me to go take it in-person class. Sure. Luckily for me, I'm able to tell my direct supervisor, like our warehouse manager, hey, I need an hour to go do this. Or, like this manufacturer pushed out a new firmware update. I'm going to go read the release notes.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. There's this, I got to do this Dante certification. I got, when CMI was bought by On Services owns a Meyer rig where we have, CMI had L-acoustic stuff. So I was already trained in like LA Net Manager and Sound Vision and that kind of stuff. But then I had to go and like figure out the Meyer room modeling software.
Yeah.
So that I could know that piece of the puzzle too. So that was just more time out of my day. And I do a lot of that stuff just on my own too, because it interests me. Mm-hmm. Like you were saying about a bunch of different YouTube pages. I follow a bunch of social media pages about stuff. I'm constantly checking. Like I also own like a Midas M32, so I'm constantly checking. They're notorious for not having bad customer service. Yeah. But that being said, I'm always picking up a little tip or trick just by going to the YouTube page for it, exactly. Or by going onto a forum, or like I'm about to do a job with a company and it's Avid consoles. Yep. Well, CMI has long been a Yamaha house, So it's been very easy for me to keep up with everything from the QL series to the PM Ravage series. Like
Yeah.
I've been on vacation the last 2 weeks, and I've been like watching, video stuff about like how to do what.
Yeah.
Namely routing. Anyone that knows digital audio knows that like if you can figure out the routing, you can figure out the rest of it. But how to make sure this goes there and that goes here, and why aren't I here? I see that it's sending, but I'm not hearing, like all that's the tough stuff. So
Exactly.
I've been doing a lot of focus on the routing of these consoles. So
So you, in being in the audio field,
yeah.
have you seen more companies coming out, or do you see the amount of different consoles becoming more and more? Or are they just streamlining? Because honestly, I'm being somebody who's more of a video guy. I don't really know
Yeah.
much about that. So
I see that from both doing like musicals and stuff. Like I said, I'm a stagehand, so I work at our local like touring Broadway house. And then out at the shed, CMAC, and then what I'm seeing on the corporate side of it, I don't see as much on the corporate side because I manage all of the audio in our warehouse.
Gotcha.
So I know what it is that we have, and I know how to use that stuff really, really well. I'm not really getting too much of, if you will, an outsider education on that stuff unless I'm doing that on my own, which
Sure.
clearly I'm not opposed to. I'm seeing the same stuff come through a lot.
Mhm.
I'm seeing a lot of, Yamaha PM10s. I'm seeing a lot of Avid consoles. I'm seeing all the same
Yeah.
stuff. I love it when the old timers come through and they have their old gigantic analog desks. Shout out to Jim Regis. Last time I saw him, he was out with I think the Black Crows, and he shows up with just massive, just like 8 people to pick it up, like that kind of
That's amazing.
like, oh, like this is the sound we're going for.
Well, I mean, it makes sense if you're at a place like you had mentioned CMAC, but when you're in a smaller venue and they don't
Yeah,
have
you
it,
don't see it. Yeah.
yeah. So,
They do still have an old Alan Heath Mix Wizard at the Bug Jar,
ah,
which was still an upgrade from the Mackie 1604. I started there with them.
I can't even imagine that
I'm
small.
trying to talk them into, because at time, that like that's a 200 cap place.
Sure,
They got to be pretty budget conscious.
of course.
I'm trying to talk them into something small like the X32 Compact or the M32R. The same functionality, but on like half of the size.
Yeah,
And their pushback is like, well, the people that we have working here aren't going to know how to figure that out. And I'm just like, pay me for a day of training and I'll teach them.
exactly.
Like I figured it out on the job. You can figure it out on the job too. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm
And
about to
actually,
sharpen the spoon here.
as a freelancer myself, it's no longer working for a full-time AV company.
Yeah.
That is something that I actually enjoy doing. I have gotten 2 gigs out of calling a local AV company and been like, hey, I'll do this training for free because I already know how to do it. I can train some of your staff that don't know how to use this piece of gear, and in turn, you just put me on a gig,
Yeah.
and that's been great.
Yeah, I've actually paid to rent console time from other rental houses
Mhm.
to go out there and get my hands on it. And I show up with my laptop and my earbuds, and I put on some near field speakers so that I can hear it but not annoy them. I make sure that I have, a couple set of headphones so that I can, I've even run outputs into different headphone amplifiers and then had like different headphones just so I could check all of my different stuff going on,
Yeah.
and paid money out of my own pocket just to sit in their warehouse, for a couple hours and fool around with this stuff just to get the training. We are an industry where if you are not keeping up on things yourself, you are going to find yourself left behind. And if not left behind, at a minimum, like stagnating.
Exactly. Exactly.
Some people are okay with just working in the same dingy club, just working for the same clients, doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Oh, absolutely.
I have no problem with working in the same dingy clubs. I still work in a lot of the same dingy clubs and a lot of the same beautiful clubs around here in my area. But I also want to grow my worth. I kind of came off the road as a touring tech to focus on the warehouse because I realized that like some of my health and my life outside of work was suffering.
Sure.
And actually, it was almost wonderful because I was realizing this like as COVID hit. So it was a perfect time. I had to pull back,
Yeah.
and it was just way better. And then when I came back kind of into the industry, I was like, I don't want to spend 18, 20 weeks on the road anymore. I'm just,
Exactly.
I'm done.
Which ironically I'm back to doing,
Yeah.
traveling quite a bit. But at this point in my life, I don't mind it so much. My kids are grown.
Just as we both know, that's the industry. That's not,
Correct, correct. But
so I was able to take off the last 2 weeks of December as PTO, and nobody questioned the fact that
yeah.
3/4 of the office is not there at all.
Yeah. Well, I guess my biggest frustration now is I'm just starting to get stir crazy, and I still have 2 weeks left, and I've got to find stuff to do. So doing this podcast is actually great.
Wonderful.
I actually did kind of want to bring this up because this comes up more often than not as far as questions from some of the people that I work with. Being in a local IATSE
Yeah.
and being a part of a local rental house or as it were for you, a production company.
Yeah.
Do you ever find those two things conflicting? And two, if so, obviously, for our viewers, obviously, I'm sure you pick your full-time job over the IATSE, but has there ever been a circumstance where you've wanted to do the other?
Where I wanted to do more IATSE work than more.
Well, for instance, IATSE had a call for a big concert and you wanted to work that, but you obviously have your full-time job and you couldn't do that.
Oh yeah, that comes up all the time, but I schedule my PTO around it, and I have no problem taking a paid day off to go get paid to work again somewhere else.
Yeah.
I was very forthright with the business agent and executive council of our local that my full time is a full time, and that they definitely have me as the head of audio at CMAC every summer, and that I will figure that out.
Yeah.
But not to really count on me if it comes to like overnight Broadway loadouts or carpet calls at the convention center or a tent call in a field for like that kind of stuff. That if it's just a generic hand call and it's for the company I work for,
Mhm.
I have to make sure that I didn't tell them that I wouldn't work the job as a leader, a technician, before I then show up as a stagehand. I'm very conscious, cognizant about conflicts of interest that way.
Exactly. So that being said, obviously when you started in the local IATSE, you started at the bottom, and now you are working at CMAC. If obviously each
I
year,
actually didn't. I'm going to cut you off right there, and I actually didn't. My IATSE journey is kind of different than a lot of my brothers and sisters and others out there.
Mhm.
I started out just doing that as handwork before I came back full time to CMI, because I had left to take another job because nobody knew what COVID was doing. So then I had left that job and was doing just some bullshit IT work at a local college. And then I started to do the handwork to supplement that because I knew everybody. Have a very dear friend, Steve Wozniak. Thank you, Woz. Kind of brought me in because they didn't have a whole lot of technical people that came back when entertainment started its uptick.
Sure.
So I came in and I was just doing like load-ins and load-outs there. And then I really had the good fortune, much like when I said I walked into the bug jar and a friend of mine was like, hey, what are you doing right now? I was doing a call and I happened to get the deckhand call. So that meant I had to be there all day. I was doing changeovers and just all that kind of stuff. I wasn't in a lead position. While I was there was some argument I was not privy to between the head electrician, the head of sound, and the business agent, who was also our acting steward at that venue at the time.
Gotcha.
And our head electrician quit.
Mm.
So they slid the head of sound into the head electrician role, and for the rest of that season, slid me into the head of audio role. After that season was done, there was a conversation, and the guy that had been head of audio was like, "Hey Jim, do you want to take over this role, because I don't want to do this?"
Gotcha. So it was pretty much sheer luck that.
Luck. I happened to get the call that day to be at the concert when this series of unfortunate events happened, and then I was doing. It was maybe two. I don't even think it was 2 months. I think it was before the next season started, where I got a call from the president of our IATSE, our local, and he was like, "Hey, myself and the business agent would like to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay." So I went and talked to those guys, and they were like, "The executive board talked about and the general body talked about is someone's going to have a house/lead position. They should probably be a card holder." And I was like, "Where's the paperwork?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Just here, like, here's everything." And I didn't slide in. I still had to interview. It still had to go to the international. They still had to review my application. I still had to do all of those steps, but I didn't have to work like 1,000 hours setting up chairs on the floor of a hockey rink,
Yeah.
For a whatever concert before I could put the application in. I also at this point had 20 years in the industry.
Yeah.
So I wasn't coming in just because my buddy did it and we needed warm bodies.
Yeah. And I'm sure in your local there wasn't any pushback, or if there was, there wasn't much from any other guys. So
yeah, and if there was, I wasn't privy to it.
exactly. So I guess basically what I'm getting at is, not saying that Rochester's a tiny IATSE market, but if this was Boston or Philly or New York City, the chance.
New York, San Francisco, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't have been that way.
Not going to happen.
No, I'm actually, I don't want to say concerned. Maybe I guess concerned isn't too harsh, because I guess I'm not worried. I'm concerned that if I choose to move to a larger city, how my card is going to transfer.
Yeah.
Or how I'm going to transfer in. I wouldn't expect to transfer in and get a house position.
Correct.
That's unrealistic.
Correct. And that's the same
I lived in the Bay Area for a long time, like I said, and with the way my life circumstances are now, I'm entertaining the idea of heading back out there. I loved living in the Bay Area, but I'm not going to head back to the Bay Area if I'm not going to be. And I should probably know the number if I'm going to want to join. But if I was going to move back out there, it would, I would make sure that my card's in good standing, and then I would have my president reach out to their president and see what it would take if they would accept, my card to work out there, or if I could transfer my affiliation and
sure,
and what that would look like.
You may have to take a step.
It's a concern that they would say no. We had a couple of card holders who moved to other places, and then their local came back and said no.
Yeah.
I don't know all the circumstances because that's not my business, but
of course.
Yeah, that's something that I would be concerned about.
Exactly. So let me interrupt us for a quick second. We've got about 5 minutes left on my little timer here. So if you don't mind, why don't we break off, and then we'll come right back on. It's going to take me a minute or so because it has to take all the video and dump it to my hard drive, and then
whatever it takes.
You got it. So I'll see you in a couple minutes.
And now a word from Dasan about the new Perfecute.
Exactly. Being in this industry, seeing how stuff gets set up, how does that affect when you're at like a big concert?
So of course I am looking at the front of house and how it's set up and what desks they're using and what outboard equipment they might have and what other kind of plugins or anything else they're running. I'm looking to see if they're just like what software might be running. I'm looking at what the array is, the way it's hung, like what the sub pattern might be, if they've just got like boxes across the front, old school, or if it's in a cardioid pattern, or if it's, if it's in a square, or if it's in like an end fight, like just all the nerdy stuff that like we do. But then other than that, I've really learned how to like turn my ears off and just enjoy the show for what it is.
Sure.
Of course, I'm able to hear if they're using, like backing vocal tracks, or I've heard in real time when like a singer's pitch will shift, but you can tell it's not because of anything they've done. And I'm like, oh, someone is sitting there correcting this in real time.
Yeah.
There was a large country artist that I'm not naming because I won't name them. I'm not naming them because a lot of that genre blends to me.
Sure.
And at the amphitheater that I work at, we get a lot of those acts through, and I really don't remember who it was. But there was a whole person who was just sitting there with headphones on and a couple different computers, and all they were doing was real-time pitch correction for the singers.
Ah.
So I was like, oh man.
And that just gets into, how music has changed over the years.
And you know what? And at the end of the day, we are in the entertainment industry. So if
Sure.
you go out there and you have a good time, I really don't care, and I've done more than enough stuff where like there's backing tracks because like there's a horn part on one song. Now, if you're out on tour, you're bringing out a trombone, a trumpet, a saxophone player, so that one song that has a couple of like ba-da-ba-ba-bop, like stabs in it, and then those people get off. You're not doing that.
Yeah.
Bring the tracks in, and it's not like if it's full on like Milli Vanilli controversy kind of just lip syncing, then I get it. But people when they're going to see pop music in particular, they want to see the dances the artists do in the little TikTok thing.
Yeah.
And in the video, they want to see all that. Well, guess what? When you're running around and jumping and dancing like that, there's no way your vocals stay perfect.
Exactly.
There's no way. Which is why I respect someone like Pink, who is undoubtedly a pop artist with like rock leanings, because although I've never seen her live, I've seen a couple of like her live like DVDs or full on concert YouTube performances or whatever. And she runs across the stage and stops, and you hear like, and then she's like back into the song while the backing vocalists who are right there on the stage like sing the part while she like catches her breath. I'm just like, oh, okay, like there's a human up there. Like I can appreciate that. But you're going to see Beyonce or I don't even know who anymore. You know what I mean? Like there's no way they're doing the entire Singles Ladies Dance or whatever Cowboy Carter track they're performing and not running out of breath. I don't care.
Exactly.
Elite athletes run out of breath after running that long. You know what I mean? You're not hitting all your stuff pitch perfect. So I guess long story longer, you're in the entertainment industry, have fun. Just don't lie about it, Motley Crue. Just get out there and provide the show and have a good time and give the people what they want. But when you get caught, just sit, tell the truth about it.
Exactly.
I can't sing like I used to.
Yeah.
I need this to cover up that, I mean, even Danny Carey from Tool, one of the best drummers out there, there are parts he records in the studio that he doesn't have a tabla to play when that part of the song comes up. So you see him reach over and hit the pad. Boop.
Yep.
And the tabla part goes, and then he comes in and plays the song. So
exactly.
It's okay. You don't complain when guitar players switch the stuff up on their pedals. Oh, this part's distorted, this part's clean. Well, they didn't take a guitar off and switch amps because this amp has the distorted sound and this amp has the clean sound. They push a button. Just have fun. Just have fun with it.
Yeah. So speaking of that, what would you say would be your like top 4 concerts that you've been to?
Like stuff I've enjoyed as a punter, like someone like in the crowd.
Yes.
Number one, and I said this last time, this is number one, Janelle Monáe when she played the Rochester Jazz Fest, I think it was 2016. I didn't know if I was at a pop show, an R&B show, an Ike Tina style revival. I didn't know if I was in like a Southern Baptist church with a 50-person choir. I didn't know if she was like channeling Prince. Like it was amazing. She gave all of the energy. artist is it's supposed to be one artist and they're supposed to do 90 minutes. She did maybe 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Like from the minute the show started, I was like on edge because it was so good. What a performer! What an entertainer! She switched effortlessly from, like I just said, singing gospel to singing rock to singing about having lesbian sex with robots, like whatever Janelle is into, all about it. She is a full on 100% amazing artist.
Nice.
Um, when I saw Metallica open up for Ozzy Osbourne in '86, I was a mere 14. I was into Ozzy, Sabbath, Priest, Maiden, Scorpions, that kind of stuff, but I hadn't ventured into, the burgeoning thrash movement. I didn't know Slayer and Venom and Metallica and Exodus and whatever. And, you know, Sharon Osbourne, think what you want about her, had the foresight and the genius to give Metallica like 50 minutes and a full stage set. And when they got done, I literally turned to the buddy I was with. Like I said, I was 14, and I was like, "Do you want to go?" And he's like, "Huh?" And I'm like, "There's no way that fat, drunk English bloke is going to be better than what we just saw. That's the best band on the planet." And ticket sales will show you how Metallica's doing. I don't think they're hurting for ticket sales. They blew me away. I'm so glad
Absolutely.
I got to see Cliff Burton play. There's just the energy and the passion they had on Master of Puppets was amazing. That show was absolutely amazing. Maybe a Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul. I saw them in a club. De La was on tour for I think De La Soul is dead. It was either De La Soul is dead or Balloon Mind State. I don't remember whichever one came out at the same time as Tribe released Low End Theory, which is still a classic of the genre. You don't like hip hop if you don't like Tribe Called Quest, Low End
Yeah.
Theory. That's it. And I think that's the album that Fife Dog gave my favorite quote, which is simply, "Get yourself some toilet paper because your lyrics is butt."
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly.
I love that. So what was that? That was three. When I saw Ghost's first U.S. tour, when I saw Voivod play with Soundgarden and Faith No More opening
Oh my God. Yeah.
in 90, 91, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, Beastie Boys opening for Madonna. Who would have known what these moron like white rap kids would have become? Like
You saw that concert?
I saw that concert. Yeah,
Wow.
that was '83 or '84. I was lucky. I grew up in a biker family. My old man would take me to concerts if I wanted to go, and I
That's
knew
cool.
that they're hating it, but he knew that music is what I loved, so I got to see a lot of really really great stuff.
I'm sure that was interesting for him to take you to um, something like Beastie Boys and then turn around, a couple months later and take it to Metallica or something like
Oh, I
that.
went to Metallica on my own.
Oh, okay.
I was old enough at that point. By the time I was like 13, I started going to concerts by myself.
Nice.
But he took me to see Judas Priest in '84. The first time I saw Priest, they're not the band I've seen the most, but they're the band I've missed the least, if that makes sense. Every time they come through on tour, I go. The band I've seen the most is Sick of It All, and I've probably seen Sick of It All almost 100 times. But they would come through like every 3 months in the mid '90s, and they'd play like I'm in Rochester, New York, and they'd play like Buffalo on a Saturday and like Syracuse on a Sunday. So we would drive an hour in either direction and see Sick of It All twice in a weekend.
Yeah,
So I easily would see Sick of It All like 15 times a year for like 4 or 5 years. You know what I mean? It was no big. I still don't get tired of seeing Sick of It.
that's
They still
awesome.
sing it every single night. And you
So,
don't like hardcore music if you don't like Sick of It All. If you think
like,
you like hardcore and you're into all these bands with 100 million names or stuff that's actually metalcore and you're calling it hardcore, like you're not into. I mean, if you're into Foundation and Knock Loose and that kind of stuff, like go for it, man. That stuff's awesome. But you don't really like hardcore if you don't like Sick of It All. You got to change
and
your.
and you don't like punk if you don't like hardcore.
That's it, because they're all just versions of rock. So if you don't like the blues, then you don't like metal.
Exactly.
If you want to
Exactly.
trace it back.
So speaking of tracing it back, you are in a band. Could you tell our audience a little bit about your band, where you guys came from, how long you've been doing it, what kind of
Oh, geez.
genre?
How long do we have? My current band is called Moment of Truth. We've been together since 1991. We're a hardcore punk band from all over the United States now, but we were founded in Rochester, New York. 3 out of 5 of us live here. Our lead guitar player, Nathan, lives in Longmont, Colorado, like suburb of Denver, basically. Our singer, Sergeant Major, Command Sergeant Major, I better get his title right. Command Sergeant Major Jason Zeller recently retired after 33 years in the U.S. Army. And I think for about the last 10 of them, he was at Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn when he wasn't being, sent all around the world at the whim of Uncle Sam. And now I believe he lives in like northern Maryland. But we took a break in like 96 ish, 97, I think, and got back together in 2016. Since then, we put out an album called No Blind Eyes on WTF Records out of the Netherlands. It's available on all streaming platforms. Make sure you look up Moment of Truth, No Blind Eyes. There's another hardcore band from Florida with the same name. They're doing awesome. I don't know those guys, but I like their band. I
Sure.
love their name. They got a great name.
Yeah.
Uh, they were doing a lot of festivals and stuff. Anytime I saw that they were playing a festival or a show near here, I would chime onto the page and be like, hey, everybody, so you know, this is the band from Florida, not the band from Rochester. Please go to the show and support them. So, because I don't care about that. We're a part-time, just for fun band. We got our start when my best friend and bass player met each other in high school in 1987. We promptly started our very first band together. A few different iterations of that and a couple other bands. We end up starting Moment of Truth, and we've been going ever since. We put out 2 full lengths, 2 or 3 7 inches, probably like 4 or 5 demos. I'm the only consistent member, so I always joke with those guys that like if I'm on stage, it's a Moment of Truth show. It doesn't matter who else is playing with us. So it's
Nice.
a lot of
So
fun.
what got you into punk music as opposed to something pop or country or whatever? Was it just that?
I grew up, like I said, I grew up in a biker family, so I grew up with classic rock and like what I would consider classic country and outlaw country. Charlie Daniels, David Allan Coe, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, Patsy Cline, George Jones. Like I could go on and on and on. You want to know more about country music? Go to the Cocaine and Rhinestones podcast. There you go, Tyler Mahan Co. I'll give you a little plug. That's an exhaustive history of 20th century country music. So,
Nice.
um, so through that, I got into just heavier rock. I had some neighbors that were a couple years older, and they were into, Thin Lizzy and AC/DC. I think the heaviest they ever got was, like I said earlier, like Priest, Maiden, Scorpions, Ozzy. But loving that stuff, and as the genres changed, that got me into Metallica, Exodus, Slayer. And then I just started going to local shows, started seeing flyers for punk shows. You know how it is. It's kind of like it just all comes together. And what I found was I kind of like the energy and the ideals and politics of the punk and hardcore scene a little bit more than of the metal scene. And I had a transition in high school where I went from being like the metalhead that was going to all the punk and hardcore shows to being like the punk kid. Like I was never really like a punk, but like the hardcore kid that was going to all the punk and metal shows. So
Yeah.
I transitioned, and I like the skateboarding and the community and the like DIY ethic. And as much as I loved, like beer and pizza and sword and sorcery and like all that kind of stuff, um, I like singing about what's going on in my head, my heart, and the world, and like that just hits me a little bit harder, But if you look at my exhaustive record collection here, you'll find you'll find just as many Venom records as you will like Born Against records. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of like that as well. I'm all over the place. I'll listen to Fishbone 1 minute and then could be listening to Neil Diamond because that's what I grew up on because my dad always listened to Neil
yeah.
Diamond.
um I had no idea who Fishbone was when I saw them on tour for Truth and Soul, and I went to see like the local punk opener. I saw Fugazi the first time. They played for like maybe like 100 people in like '89 or something here. The
Yeah.
flyer only said Fugazi from DC. It didn't say like Ian from Minor Threat and Guy from Rites of Spring, and
Yeah.
Joe and
Exactly.
Brendan have great resumes too, but it didn't say that. It was just like Fugazi from DC, and I went to see the local opener, this band Hunger Artist, who were like the kind of kings of the hardcore punk scene in like the late 80s around here. Like that was the band every band wanted to see, be in. Like they toured, they put out records, their shows were packed, they were great, so
Yep.
years
It's fun.
later I became good friends with the singer and the guitar player.
It's funny you say that because
Oh, look at that. Fugazi, who never made merch. You're wearing
yeah.
I think it's great we're both wearing bootleg shirts. Like this bolt thrower, this is a complete bootleg thrower shirt here. They don't if bolt thrower, if anyone if from bolt thrower happens to hear this, make licensed merch, we'll buy it. You don't make licensed merchandise, so we all buy bootleg stuff.
Exactly. And I actually bought this because I was going to go see kind of like I don't remember exactly what type of band they were. They were definitely not a punk band. Two of the guys were from Fugazi.
You went and saw the Messmatics?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Oh my God, that last record is so amazing. It's so amazing. I don't know if you know this, Eric, but almost their entire live catalog is available on the Discord website. So if you happen to have been at either of the shows at Harrow East here in Rochester, they are both available for download for the amazing price of like $3 to $5.
Nice.
And you can get either of those shows. And I saw them in Cleveland. I saw them in Syracuse. I saw them in Buffalo. I've gone and found the shows I was at. I saw them a couple times in Buffalo, and I've gone and found those shows and downloaded them. The one that's not available is that first one I mentioned earlier from '89. It's listed as a show they played because all the shows they played are listed, but it's not available. No one recorded that one. So
so thanks, Jim, for being on the show, and everyone else, we will see you on the next gig.
Drive fast, take chances.